Ephraim Bowles stood on the depot boards at Roan Springs on a bright Tuesday afternoon in May, with his hat in his hand, and could not look Cora Beeman in the face. His Aunt Jean, 68, in her plain green Sunday dress, put her elbow into his ribs. "Ephraim," Ephraim said, at his boots. "Ma'am." Aunt Jean said, "Look at her." Ephraim tried. His eyes went to Cora's collar. They went to her hat brim. They went to the boards. Cora Beeman, 27 years old, widowed of a Peoria clerk 2 years back, in a plain gray traveling dress with a soft white collar and one small carpet bag on the boards beside her, watched all of this with a kind, steady interest. She said, in a voice like a person offering a cup of water, "Mr. Bowles, it is a pleasure to meet you, Miss Bowles. I have been reading your letters 4 months, and I am very glad to be here." Aunt Jean said, quickly, "Mrs. Beeman, it is a pleasure. Ephraim, take her carpet bag, please." Ephraim took the carpet bag. He tipped his hat again. He walked 6 steps ahead of them, toward the buckboard because he could think of nothing else to do. Aunt Jean tucked Cora's elbow through her own. "Mrs. Beeman, my nephew is a good man. He is a very shy man. You have not yet seen his face, because he cannot bring it up to your face. He will not be able to until he has heard your voice a great many times. I want you to know that plain. I have raised him since his mother died when he was 10, and I have watched him marry once and love a wife well and lose her. He is a good, honest, quiet man. He does not know how to look a stranger in the face. He never has. It is not a rudeness. It is a fact of him. I want you to know." Cora said, "Miss Bowles." Aunt Jean said, "Jean, if you please." Cora said, "Jean, thank you. My husband was a shy man too. I was widowed at 25, when the typhoid took him, and I loved him a great deal. I understand shyness. It has never once frightened me." Aunt Jean stopped walking. She looked at Cora over her spectacles. She said, "Mrs. Beeman." Cora said, "Cora." Aunt Jean said, "Cora, I have written you 11 letters in my nephew's name across 4 months. I have not once slept easy about the deceit. I want you to know I am the one who wrote them. Ephraim did not know I had answered the first one. He knew I had written the ad. He did not know I was corresponding. I told him you were coming yesterday morning. He has been washing his best coat in the creek since dawn. If you would like to turn around and take the 4 o'clock train back to Illinois, I will pay your fare with my own coin, and no ill said between any of us." Cora Beeman said, "Jean Bowles." Jean said, "Yes." Cora said, "You wrote very good letters. If Ephraim did not write them, he must approve of them, because he is here, holding my carpet bag, and he did not run yet. I would like to keep the letters we have written, and go home to the ranch, and eat the supper you have I imagine already put in the stove." Aunt Jean said, "Then let us go home. I have put a leg of mutton in the stove." At supper, Ephraim sat at the head of the plank table and did not look up. He ate his mutton. He drank his coffee. He answered "yes ma'am" and "no ma'am" to Cora when she asked him something plain, and answered "I do not know" to Cora when she asked him something less plain. He did not smile. He did not frown. His face was a mild, grave country of a face at his plate, and he could not, would not, raise his eyes. Aunt Jean watched this for the whole meal. She refilled her nephew's coffee twice. She did not remark. At the end of the meal, she stood up. She said mildly, "Well, I am going to town this afternoon. I have 3 errands. The 2 of you will wash the plates and put on a pot of coffee, and sit at this plank table until I return. You will not both stand up and go do the barn chores at once. Ephraim, if you take yourself to the barn for the 3rd time this hour, I will follow you and speak to you as I did when you were 9. Cora, if you go to the guest room and unpack again for the 3rd time, I will bring you back by the ear." Cora laughed. Ephraim looked at his aunt. He did not quite laugh, but his mouth moved. Aunt Jean said, "Good. I will be back at 5. Behave yourselves. Speak." She left. Ephraim and Cora were alone at the plank table. Ephraim looked at his coffee cup. Cora looked at Ephraim, and she said quietly, "Mr. Bowles, I would like to know one thing about you. What are you good at? Ephraim looked up. For the first time in 5 hours he looked at her. He had brown eyes. They were kind. He said, I know every song my mother ever sang. I can whittle a fiddle. I can build a fence a horse cannot cross. I can find a cow in a blizzard in the dark. Those are the things I am good at. Cora said, You had no trouble looking at me for that answer, Mr. Bowles. Ephraim, without knowing he was going to, laughed. He laughed one small startled note. He put his hand up over his mouth. He laughed again. He put his coffee cup down. He looked at Cora across the plank table and did not look away. He said, Ma'am, that was a fair thing to point out. Cora said, It was fair. Ephraim said, May I ask you one thing back? Cora said, Yes. Ephraim said, What are you good at? Cora said, I can make a pan of biscuits my father would have paid $2 for. I can mend a Sunday dress by lamp. I can sit at a plank table an evening with a shy man and not press him toward speech. I can read Trollope and Dickens and Scott, and I have my father's copies with me in the trunk. I can hold a rifle straight, and I have shot at a coyote once and missed, and I have shot at a jackrabbit twice and hit. Those are the things I am good at. Ephraim said, Trollope. Cora said, Trollope. Ephraim said, My mother read Trollope. Cora said, I am glad to hear it. They sat. After a moment, Ephraim said, Cora. Cora said, Yes. He said, Thank you for coming a very long way. Thank you for not turning around at the depot. I do not know if I will ever be a man who looks at his wife over supper, the way another man looks at his wife over supper. I would like to be that man. I do not yet know how. Cora said, Ephraim. He said, Yes. She said, You just did it. He said, I did. Cora said, That is enough for a first afternoon. Ephraim said, Yes. They washed the plates. He handed her the wet plates and she dried them with the linen towel. He did not once drop his eyes to the sink board when he handed her a plate. She noticed. He noticed her notice. Neither said a word about it. Aunt Jean came back at 5 with 3 parcels and a satisfied face, and did not, when she came in the door, ask a question. She looked at her nephew. She looked at Cora. She saw that Ephraim's collar was unbuttoned at the throat. She saw that Cora's face was pink at the cheeks. She saw that there was a stack of dry plates on the shelf. She said, mildly, I told you the mutton would be good tonight. Ephraim said, Yes, Aunt Jean. Aunt Jean set down her parcels. Aunt Jean set down her parcels. She took her coat off. She hung it on the peg. She did not say anything more. She sat down in the rocker by the stove and picked up her Bible and began to read. Ephraim looked at Cora over the shelf of dry plates. Cora looked back at him. She said mildly, Ephraim, what time do you rise for the barn? He said, 4:30. She said, Then we should sleep. I will see you at breakfast. He said, Yes, Cora. He walked her to the door of the guest room. He did not linger. He said, Good night, ma'am, and went to his own room. Cora shut the door of the guest room and stood a moment with her back against it. She did not know she was smiling until she caught herself in the small square mirror above the washstand. The 6 weeks after that unfolded at the pace an Ephraim Bowles will unfold at, which was slow but real. He showed Cora the pasture on the second afternoon. He showed her the small stone corner of the corral he had laid himself when he was 15. He showed her the horse he had raised from a foal, called Sundown. He showed her the willow tree at the creek where he had, at 11, sat with his mother the last summer of her life. She did not press him for stories. He told them anyway, one at a time, over evenings. On the 12th evening he came into the kitchen after supper, with a fiddle in his hand. Cora looked up from her mending. Ephraim said, This is what my mother taught me. I have not played it for a stranger in 10 years. I do not know if you like fiddle music. Cora said, I like fiddle music, Ephraim. Play. He played. It was a plain, slow song. He was not a great fiddler. He was a good one. He knew the tune. He closed his eyes. Aunt Jean, in the rocker by the stove, did not open her eyes. but her mouth softened. When he stopped, Cora set the mending down. She said, "Ephraim Bowles." He said, "Cora." She said, "That was your mother's song and I will keep it." He put the fiddle down. He came across the kitchen. He sat down on the plank floor at Cora's feet by the mending chair. He did not touch her. He put his rough hand along the floorboard next to her hem. He said, "Cora, I have been reading your letters for 6 weeks now, and you have been reading mine for 4 months, and I have been sitting at my own plank table with you for 6 weeks. I have not been shy with you at supper for 2 weeks. I have wanted to say a plain thing for 2 weeks. If I say it plainly, I will not stop looking at you, and I would like to know if that is welcome to you before I say it." Cora said, "Ephraim, it is very welcome." Ephraim said, "Then I would like to marry you. Not as an arrangement my Aunt Jean has cleverly made. As a man who has been undone by a woman at his own plank table across 6 weeks of ordinary evenings. Please marry me, Cora." Cora said, "Yes, Ephraim." Aunt Jean, in the rocker by the stove, opened one eye and said, "Thank the good Lord," and passed the mending. The circuit preacher married Ephraim Bowles and Cora Beeman in the parlor of the Bowles Ranch on the 2nd Sunday of July. Aunt Jean, 68, gave the bride away with a look on her face that suggested a woman who had waited to see this through since her nephew was 10. Old Sims the foreman stood witness for Ephraim. Aunt Jean stood witness for Cora, because Cora had asked her to. Afterward, on the porch step, with the yellow bunchgrass pasture stretching out toward the low blue of the Wind River peaks, and the barn open at the far corner of the yard, with 2 horses cropping grass at its threshold, Cora Bowles sat next to Ephraim Bowles and put her hand through his elbow. She said, "Ephraim." He said, "Cora." She said, "May I ask you a plain question?" He said, "Yes." She said, "Are you shy of me anymore?" Ephraim thought about it. He was a considering man, and he considered. He said, "Cora, I am not shy of you. I am shy of a great many things. I will be shy of the men in town for the rest of my life, and shy of the Grange supper, and shy of the schoolmaster who talks a great deal, and shy of the boarders at the boarding hotel. I will not be shy of you. That is a place in me I did not know I could clear. You cleared it." Cora said, "Good." She put her cheek against his cheek. 2 years on a warm September afternoon at the Bowles Ranch, Cora Bowles sat on the porch step reading Trollope aloud to a small daughter called Anne, who was 1 year old and had her father's kind brown eye and her mother's exact clear voice. Ephraim came in from the pasture with old Sims and stopped in the yard to listen a moment before he came up the porch step. Aunt Jean, in the rocker on the porch, said mildly, without opening her eyes, "Nephew." Ephraim said, "Aunt Jean." Aunt Jean said, "I did well." Ephraim said, "You did, Aunt Jean." Aunt Jean said, "Do not thank me. I am not the only one who did well. Your wife is the one who sat down at that plank table after mutton and asked you what you were good at. I would have done it wrong. She did it right. Thank her, not me." Ephraim came up the porch step. He kissed the top of his wife's head. He kissed the top of his daughter's head. He sat down next to Cora on the step. He said, "Cora, Aunt Jean says I am to thank you." Cora said, "For what?" Ephraim said, "For asking me at that first supper what I was good at." Cora said, "You did not need thanking. You needed one honest question. I have watched a great many shy men in my life, and I have known that a shy man only needs a plain question to which he knows the answer, and after that, his face will come up out of his coffee. That was all it was." Ephraim said, "That was all it took." The pasture went to gold under the September sun. Old Sims began a slow tune on his mouth harp from the bunkhouse porch. Anne pointed at a hawk and said in her 3 words, "Bird, big, there." And Cora Beeman Bowles, who had stepped off a Roan Springs train in a plain gray traveling dress, and had watched a shy widower stare at his boots at his own depot, put her cheek against her husband's cheek, and understood that the good slow country had, in its good slow way, brought her out of an Illinois boarding house widowhood, and put her, over a plate of mutton, at the plank table of a man who had waited 33 years for a woman who understood that the plainest question was the one that opened him. And it had.